Hello, this is Rev Don Lewis coming to you from the beautiful metaverse and more specifically, beautiful Danville, Illinois, homeland of the Corellian tradition. And welcome to Midday with Rev Don. And I love spending this time with you. I hope you enjoy it each day. And as you know, if you follow Midday with Rev Don, you can interact with me directly by typing your questions or comments directly into whatever platform you happen to be watching on, and they will appear here in my chat room, and we will interact directly. And I want to say hello to Samantha in the chat room. It's good to see you, Samantha. And I very much enjoy this time each day. And today we're going to be talking about aliens, as well as other things going on in my life. And the first thing I want to mention is actually my September seminar, which I have just scheduled. As you know, I do a seminar each month for my Patreon at revdonlewis.com. For September, the Patreon seminar will be on the subject of seances. What is a seance? How to conduct a seance? What are the dangers of seances? I've been doing seances for most of my life, and I will talk to this subject in as much detail as the seminar permits, and you can learn all about what seances are and how to do your own. And hello to Renee in the chat room. Good to see you, Renee. And you can find that at corellianpublishing.com. It is open to all of my Patreon supporters at the seminar tier, or to anyone by ticket for $25. And hello, Anna. It's good to see you. The month of August is going to be all about the Parliament of the World's Religions. The month of October, for me, will be all about seances. And for many years, I've very often focused on seances in October because it's the time when people's minds naturally turn in this direction. And I'll be holding a number of seances throughout the month of October. Hello to Little Salem in the chat room. Good to see you, Little Salem. The first of the seances will be October 7th. At 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern. That will be up on CorellianPublishing.com later today. The seminar is already there. Hello to Calvin in the chat room. Good to see you, Calvin. The seances, the actual seances are $50 a seat, limited to 15 seats. There will be a number of them throughout the month, and everyone is guaranteed to receive a message. I've been doing these kinds of seances for many years. Hello to Raven in the chat room. Good to see you, Raven. And I've done them for groups as great as 26 or more. But when you're giving every single person a message as part of the seance, that you have to consider that size and how long it's going to take. I'd rather do a number of seances with, say, 15 people each than one supersized seance where we go on for 6 hours or something. Hello to Antonio in the chat room. Good to see you, Antonio. Hello to Raven in the chat room. Good to see you, Raven. And, I've had some very interesting experiences doing seances. And I have to say, although, as you'll know, if you took my seminar on mediumship, I don't necessarily remember what happened, but I'm under the impression that people have also had pretty interesting experiences attending them. I've often had people talk to me after the seance and tell me how impressed they were, what kind of experience they had, and it's not uncommon, particularly when I was doing seances in Salem, just for the general public, for people to come not really expecting anything but a show, and then finding out, no, these things are real, and you actually do get a meaningful message. And of course, the messages are always different, therefore each person. There's no knowing exactly what you will get as an individual, but people have gotten some pretty memorable things. And seances, they don't have to be high theater. And I usually don't treat them that way, but they are a profound experience. So I hope you'll consider coming to one of the seances or taking the seance seminar. Seance seminar is September 30th. The seances themselves will be held in October. Generally speaking, I do this once a year. And it will probably be pretty much every week in October. So that's my plug for the day. And now on to our subject of aliens. Everyone loves aliens. We all know the guy from the History Channel who attributes everything to aliens, and we've all probably known people who, in fact, do attribute everything to aliens. There are people who believe that pretty much everything of note in human civilization was actually caused by aliens. Certainly in the ancient world, and you can read all sorts of theories about what ancient aliens supposedly did. I believe it was Eric von Daniken who was particularly associated with this concept. And when I was a younger person, I was a devotee of this idea, at least in part, but I was also a student of actual history. And I can't tell you how old I was when I realized the non sequitur. But I can tell you what did it. It was when a particular author tried to make a connection between what was obviously just a piece of jewelry and a piece of technology. Numerous pieces of jewelry exactly like this exist in museums. As a designer of such things, I had actually designed almost an identical piece just a day before. And to see him insisting that this had to be technology and couldn't be anything else made me question the whole concept and go back through. And I came to realize that most of the ancient alien theories did not hold up. And hello to Lavola in the chat room. And my view has not changed on this subject, which is not to say that I reject the concept of the existence of aliens or that they have interacted with humanity, or that they may have influenced human civilization in places. But the general ancient alien theory, to the best of my knowledge, has little to recommend it. It's based on the fallacy that humans were more primitive than we now know they were. We know that human civilization, or at least human culture, human material culture, goes back very much farther than we once believed. To the point that pre-humans were already showing signs of what has become human material culture. Early hominids. We know, for example, also that a variety of early modern humans and Neanderthal people, and presumably the Denisovan people as well, had aspects of culture already being developed. It's borne out by the archaeological record. So by the time we get to the point that people are building pyramids and Stonehenge and so forth, there's no reason at all to think they would not have been at that level of technology. Some similar accomplishments can be shown to have been done millennia before. If you're familiar with the ruins associated with Neanderthal and what used to be described as Cro-Magnon people, it shouldn't surprise you that people were building things like Stonehenge thousands of years later because they were already experimenting with that technology. But again, does that mean that I think there are no aliens? No, actually, I do believe in aliens for a couple of reasons. The first is I find it possible, but unlikely that we could really be alone in the universe. Perhaps we are, but it seems unlikely to me. The second is, I and people I know have had experiences with quote, aliens. And I say, quote, aliens because the experiences that I've had, the experiences that people I've known have had, were largely in a spiritual context. And if you look at the ordinary alien stories and compare them to people's spiritual existences and experiences, they strongly parallel. Very often, the experiences that people describe with aliens are very similar to the psychic healing experiences people have with their spirit guides. things that are described such as being immobilized. Many people who've worked extensively with psychic healing, particularly with their spirit guides, will have had this experience. Some of the specific sensations are things that you will have experienced if you've done deep spiritual cleansing. One of the ones that really caught my attention and solidified this view for me, there are a number of alien abduction stories that make an issue of a needle in the pupil of the eye. I have had this experience in meditation, working with spirit guides and spiritual healing, and through advanced study of chakras, I've also learned that there is a specific chakra in exactly that location. You can learn about it in the Binder chakra system in chapter 9 of our second degree lessons that talks about all of the minor chakra points, including those in the eye and around it. And also other similar experiences that you hear in these alien abduction stories, I have experienced in spiritual healing. I know others who have experienced the same. So for me, I do believe in the existence of these experiences. I think that they are a spiritual experience, not a science fiction experience. Now, am I saying that they're not aliens? No, I'm not. I'm saying that it is a dimensional connection rather than a spaceship. Although the unidentified flying objects also, I have seen them, my grandmother regularly saw them, people I've known have seen them. I cannot question that these things happen because I've experienced them. The most common of them appears to be a ball of light, just like we use in our psychic exercises, and usually associated, if you look at it, certainly historically, with spiritual experiences. One of the things that you don't hear when people recount their alien experiences is how often they're accompanied by psychic and other forms of opening of consciousness. The person who suddenly became an artist after their alien experience, the person who suddenly started doing psychic work after their alien experience. This all contributes to me to the belief that this is part of our spiritual continuum and that it is usually a healing experience. Now, people love to be frightened. We've talked about Oogie Boogieism on previous broadcasts. So, I mean, for some people, there's a delicious sensation in thinking of predatory aliens who are out to get them. Very much like going to a horror film. But it's not been my experience that that's what we're dealing with. Am I saying that's impossible? No. Generally speaking, there are very few things I'm going to tell you are impossible. I will say it's not been my experience. And because I've had experiences, I speak from that base. Because I know others who have had experiences, I speak from that base. And I can tell you, having had those experiences, that if I did not have a broad spiritual background, I could have had a fear reaction to it. I could have had a very negative reaction to it. But as it was, I understood this within that context. Now, you might say that I could be experiencing a biased confirmation, that because I expected to be spiritual, I interpret it that way. And that is certainly possible, just as those people who experience it in a more science fiction sort of realm could also be doing the same thing. Another phenomenon that people often have with alien encounters is that they have marks on their skin of various kinds. And I've known people who have had that happen also. But again, the people I'm dealing with have always interpreted it in a spiritual, manifestational sort of way. So what I would say is, do I think this is there? I do, absolutely. I think that we're working with these aliens who I think are exactly that, but I think that we're working either with their conscious or their higher selves in a multidimensional manner that is very, very healing and very positive for us when we allow it to be, and very frightening when we don't have a context for it and don't know what to do with it. And, you know, for many people, the spirit guide experience is that way, regardless of how they're experiencing it, if they don't have a context. I've talked at great length, and I will do so again, because I am now Grandpa Don, which means I repeat stories, about those paranormal programs that always find the demon in the basement. Even though a more experienced person will look at it and say, that's a tiny little poltergeist experience. What are you doing? But it's the same here. If we don't have a context, we don't know what to do with it. And fear is a natural reaction in the presence of the unknown. I would say particularly if you regularly have these experiences, if you're having a fear reaction, do some soul retrieval, do some shadow work, approach it as a spiritual experience and see if it doesn't become very positive for you. I think you'll find it does. It's interesting, my grandmother regularly saw UFOs, except when she invited other people over to also see them. My father desperately wanted to see them. They would never come when he was there. I have seen them. I know others who have seen them. The very first time I ever saw one, I thought that it was a vision and interpreted it that way, until I realized it conformed exactly to the UFO sighting experience. But if you look through history, they're all through history. They are carved on the walls of Egyptian pyramids. They're discussed in Roman texts. The Romans described them as shining shields, or multiple suns. The Egyptians described them as multiple suns. That's what it looks like. It looks like a sun that does not hurt your eyes to look directly at it. And usually, the actual sun will also be visible. The moon may also be visible depending on the time of day. Hello to Connor in the chat room. Welcome, Connor. And these are all aspects of the UFO sighting experience. It's a very real experience. Lots of people have had it. But do I interpret it, again, in a physical sense? No, I interpret it maybe in an astral sense, in a psychic sense. And just as we can travel astrally, I believe they can too. And, if we think it's a physical thing, the general lack of evidence becomes very disturbing. But if we're thinking of it as an aspect of astral travel, where we're coming together in another dimension, it makes perfect sense. Now, I will say that there are some historical anomalies that might lend themselves to the interpretation of physical visitation by aliens. However, I think we need to be very careful in how we interpret that. I can remember back in the 70s reading about graves that contained skulls that had unusual numbers of teeth, like rows of teeth, being cited as alien evidence because humans don't have that. Except today, I think everybody, because the world has gotten so much smaller, knows this is an actual condition that happens to actual humans, that every now and then people grow extreme numbers of extra teeth that can be very dangerous. Another one are the famous Caracas skulls, which certainly do raise some questions. There's been a claim that they were tested for DNA and turned up unknown influences, but that's also had people debunking it. And until better research is done, there's no knowing. But we do know that people have historically deformed their skulls. And because no one does that now, it's hard to say what effects that can have. Some of the Paracas skulls look like they have too much skull tissue for a human. But nobody's going to experiment on a human and find out that whether or not, if you bind the head, extra skull tissue might develop. DNA evidence is the only thing we could go on, and right now, there is no reliable DNA evidence. Now, Lavola asks, what do you think about the belief that some of these alien races are actually living in different levels inside our planet Earth? Well, because I interpret this as a spiritual and multidimensional experience, I think that is certainly possible. I think exactly where they come from, I would not claim to know. As I say, I've had some experiences within a meditational context as other spiritual experiences, but I do not I do not claim to have those answers, but I do think that yes, it could be as easily here in our own world as any other, because I don't know that we would see them, because I don't know that they're in our dimension. And multidimensionality is one of the key teachings of Corellianism, at least. No reason they could not be one of those dimensions. People have these experiences. Some people claim to know exactly where these peoples come from, but I don't think they all agree, and I don't know how. I don't know that I credit any of them at this time. Now, Calvin says, I as well have experienced fiery orbs twice, once as a child and the second time as an adult while in the military. Exactly. Lots and lots of people have, and lots of people in the spiritual world have had this experience. And again, historically, it's often been interpreted that way. Now, one of the more interesting stories historically is about the green children. And let me see if I can quickly refresh my memory of the exact year of this story. The story is that two green children were found in connection. The green children of Woolpit. Woolpit is a place in England. This is said to have happened in the 12th century, theoretically in the reign of King Stephen, which is the early 1100s. They were a brother and sister of normal human appearance, except they were green in color and spoke an unknown language and would only eat certain foods that were available. Eventually, they broadened their palates. They learned to speak in ordinary language, and they lost the green coloring, which I think is an interesting thing, and died very young. Or the boy died very young. They said they came from a very different world than this one. And it very strongly resembles some of these alien stories. And as far as I know, it's almost unique in the fact that the two people are present in the ordinary world, telling their story to ordinary people on their own. It's not anyone else's interpretation, but what they said. Is it true? It was the 1100s. Who knows if it's true? We can't even be 100% certain that the reliable history from the 1100s is necessarily true, because as we all know, the victor writes the history, and prior to relatively recently, only certain things were likely to come down, and so who knows what is missed. So how much credit do we give it? I don't know, but it is one of those many historical stories that fit the alien narrative. Another common theme is interpreting Bible stories in terms of alien phenomena. There is a whole book called, I think, Aliens in the Bible, or vice versa, that talks about the author's belief that the entire Hebrew Bible, or the Old Testament for Christians, is about contact with space aliens. And it's a fascinating, not necessarily convincing narrative, but it does bring up some very interesting points. And again, some of these stories do fit with the modern narrative that you hear. So I think that alien experiences very much fit in a historical context of what is normally rendered a spiritual experience. And Calvin says, could this not be attributed to sightings of fairies or elves from history, ancient history tales? And yes, actually it could. These things also do tend to dovetail and have certain close parallels. When we talk about astral experiences or multidimensional experiences, one of the things we often talk about is the change in the perception of time. This is also often an element in those stories of alien, quote, abductions, end quote, or even just sightings of UFOs, that there's a change in the perception of time, which to me puts it squarely in a long history of spiritual narratives. So I take this very much as a real phenomenon, but one that's primarily experienced within the spiritual realm. Is there actual physical visitation from aliens? Well, if so, they've done a very good job cleaning up after themselves. Could possibly be. But you know, I have to say, and this sums up my point of view on a lot of conspiracy theories, although I grant you some of them are more likely than others. But generally speaking, a lot of people attribute to them, whoever they may happen to be, superhuman abilities to cover their own tracks and keep things secret. Look at the world and the people you know, and how often are things actually kept secret, including really big important things. It's very common that the people just can't keep secrets, especially if it's something large involving huge numbers of people. And you know, one of the things that's often said is that the people of Germany did not understand the Holocaust was going on. But there's ample evidence to show that there was enough talk that a substantial portion did know. May not have been confirmed for them, but it was suspected at least. Even that could not be kept a total secret. Even with the German government's belief that the German people would not allow it, it could not be kept a total secret. Look at any number of political scandals in this and other countries. How often do you find 100 years later that something was kept a secret? Not very often. More often, what you'll find, and we discussed this, I believe, the other day, you'll find some revisionist will come up with a new idea for how something might have happened, like the murder-suicide of Crown Prince Rudolph and Mary Vechera, or the assassination of Rasputin, only have it come out that no, it was pretty close to what people said all along. And it's pretty rare that anything is kept a secret. Now, I did remark the other day that when the actual records of the Russian secret police became public, one of the things that came out was that Rasputin had been painted with some decidedly false colors after his death. And that with all their desire to scoop up dirt on him, there was less than history had implied that the Russian secret police had actually found. And he was far closer to how he represented himself than to what his opponents represented. But that's relatively rare, and people had been saying that all along anyway. It's just that the evidence came out later. So sometimes, I'm not saying nothing is ever kept secret, but it's rare that people can orchestrate a huge cover-up. More commonly, there will be perception of it. And with that, I see we've come to the end of our half hour. Once again, I want to recommend my my seminar on September 30th on the subject of seances. You can get a ticket to that if you're not already eligible because of my Patreon at CorellianPublishing.com later today. You will also be able to get tickets to that first seance on October 7th. And I always enjoy doing these seances. People usually enjoy attending them, and I hope some of you will do so. So thank you all for being here. I love you all. I love spending this time with you, and let us close with our prayer as we always do. Divine Mother Goddess, Divine Father God, beloved ancestors, we ask you to be with us and to guide us as we go forward. Help us to see clearly what is before us and to interpret with sobriety and common sense, all that we see, to realize that all things are possible, but not always likely, and to approach things from a sensible standpoint as we form our views. Not closing off our mind to possibility, but also keeping our feet on the ground. Beloved Mother Goddess, beloved Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you for this and all you do for us in our lives. And knowing you are always with us, yet from respect, we thank you for your presence, and may you be blessed now and always. And I thank you for your presence. Again, I love you all. I love spending this time with you, and I will see you tomorrow. And until then, may you be blessed now